So it's my pleasure to introduce Gordon Marsden, a politician who's, I think I'd say that education runs through his veins. And I remember being a young education reporter 20 years ago reporting on things that you said, Gordon. And that makes me feel old, and it makes you feel old. But anyway, MP for Blackpool South, Shadow Skills Minister, educated Oxford, London, Harvard. You previously chair of the all-party parliamentary group on education skills, a former member of the Education, Business and Skills Select Committee, and currently the Shadow Minister for HE, FE and Skills. So overview for 10 minutes on Labour's policy for apprenticeships.
Well, thank you very much, Lee. And, you know, they say that getting older is like a fine wine and you mature, so we are both in that happy position. I'm delighted to be able to come here and speak today about the launch of your really important and crucial campaign. It is something I've been delighted to do through my 2 spells as Shadow Skills Minister and now, of course, with the HE handle, to work very closely with the Sutton Trust, and particularly on the 2 major pieces of legislation that I've taken through for the opposition over the past 2 years, which of course was the Higher Education and Research Act and the Technical Further Education Act, but also in the context of my parliamentary seat as a member for Blackpool, where like many seaside and coastal towns, we have a legacy of social challenge, underachievement in terms of skills, and where young people face many of the challenges that the Sutton Trust have discussed and are discussing today in this document. And through both of those major pieces of legislation, we've sought to bring access issues to the forefront. Now, it's clear that the focus on delivering apprenticeships and the potential life chances they offer is becoming extremely urgent in the context of increased skills gap issues. Some of these are not new. You and I will remember the Leach report. I wonder how many other people in this room remember the Leach report, but that was over 10 years ago now, and it's still relevant in terms of some of its broad views of where we're going. But of course, lots of other things, not least Brexit, have come in the meantime. And over the last few weeks, I've talked at a number of events, and that they have been testament to the concerns about finding a way to improve the apprenticeship offer and get more young people involved. And so the campaign you're launching today, seeking to have more high-quality apprenticeships with a genuine alternative degree and open to all young people, is absolutely essential. And it's something, you know, it's a truism. We can all get on board with it. But it's about the devil and the detail. And thanks to some of the issues we've seen and some of the issues around start figures and other measures, I'm sure you've been questioning the Minister here on that. Indeed, as I came, I could hear echoes of that in the questions that you were given. And you know what the start figures are on apprenticeships. They're down 28% compared with the first period at the same period last year. And that means the government is 17% off its trajectory to get there. And that is worrying, and it's damaging for the sector. It's never great to miss targets, even if you don't quite know how they were brought on in the first place. And I think the Minister of Great Candour told the Parliamentary Committee that not so long ago. But it's more important because of the life chances of the young people who might be missing out as a result. And level 2, I noticed, was being talked about as I came in the room. Level 2 starts, as you know, have halved since the levy was introduced. Some of those sectors still don't have apprenticeship standards in place to help fill the resulting skills shortages. And that's what I meant about devil in the detail. And that is not helped, I'm afraid, by some of the slowness in standards approving coming out of the IFA. I've been hearing over the last few weeks worrying accounts of concern from business, large businesses, smaller ones, businesses that are part of supply chains. And I'm afraid that the slowness of delivery of those standards and as worryingly, concern that some of the DFA officials and to some extent some of the people at the IFA, and I know the IFA have had to hit the ground running, and of course now they've taken on board technical skills, but I'm still hearing concerns that they do not understand the basics of the businesses with whom they are working. And of course, if that doesn't work, then the rest of it has problems. Some of those businesses, I say, are already caught in skills shortages, And I was told, for example, at a reception just last week by the SMMT, by a key business in that area, that they have spent 18 months trying to sign off their new standards in motor automation. Those, I think, are really concerning issues. The equality issues, which, again, touched on in your question, we put down during the Technical Further Education Bill an amendment to say that the Institute needed to have regard to promoting equality of opportunity right at the centre of things. And that was about, it wasn't about a bit of boilerplate on the end of a bill. It was about trying to make sure that access and participation strategies were high up on the list of the new things for the new institute to do. Now, you know, civil servants being civil servants and ministers being ministers, they didn't accept it. But I would like to think that that was something that was weaving itself in every speech that the minister makes and everything that Jerry Berrigan thinks about when he has the myriad of things that he has to think about. And the question earlier, the question just now on the issue of management crowding out, management degrees crowding out other opportunities. Like the minister, I'm not against people upskilling and that in that period of time. We do have to ask questions, though, about what the relationship of using the levy for that is compared to the training and the CPD that some of those companies should be doing in the first place. That is concerning. And if we don't get people, we want to get people earning while they learn, but if we don't will, at that crucial early period, the means for everyone to achieve the goals, we can't simply talk about social mobility. So what do we do about improving access and participation? How do we put some sharp edges on the words? Right at the beginning of the process that led to the IFA, when we were actually the first ones in the committee to propose a framework for it, while the government was still trying to work out how it fitted in with the Enterprise Bill, we did ask for setting targets to increase apprenticeships for people with disabilities, care leavers and veterans, and ensure greater representation of women, people from BME backgrounds, LGBT, and people with disability in all kinds of apprenticeships. And we didn't do that as a tokenist thing, but because we know from experience that all of those groups of people, if they can be engaged in those sorts of areas, will deliver very well, not just for themselves, but for the economy that we're working on. So we really would like to see the government, having previously set targets for BME people, to look more widely at other areas. And we talk about the importance of good quality apprenticeships. And of course, when Apprenticeship Week comes round, MPs all have a good story to tell, most of them, in their constituency. But the question is not, are there good employers out there delivering good apprenticeships? It's not, are there good teachers out there teaching and talking about good apprenticeships in schools, at secondary or even primary? The question is, have we got the volume and capacity of that taking place? And I would say that we haven't. And if we want, for instance, to talk about good quality apprenticeships, we should also be looking at the more than 600,000 young people currently not in work or education, according to government figures. And the latest ONS statistics show that those figures are rising. We ought to be thinking about people who are on ESOL courses, and particularly in particular parts of the country where there are very significant numbers in that area. And the government, frankly, has been too complacent. We can't neglect the stats on ESOL, we can't neglect the stats on basic skills, and we can't neglect the stats on NEETs if we want to have a holistic programme that will deliver apprenticeships in the way that we need to deliver them, but which will also deliver the issues of social mobility, which I know that you are very concerned about at the Sutton Trust and have been for so long. And it does seem to me that the government appear to be putting them into the slow lane. And it's hampering its own necessity to expand our skills base with the departure of a key number of EU internationals. I don't know, Mark Dorr asked Anne the question that he's been asking her for some time, and I don't know how long we have to keep banging on about the squandering of these opportunities and the need to have pre-apprenticeship courses there that are going to get more people to the starting point in the beginning. Never mind the people who come through and get quality apprenticeships. They're excellent, but there aren't enough of them. And I don't care what you call them. You can call them pre-apprenticeship training, but we need something that will give that step change, because many young people today are simply not employment ready when they leave school or complete a level 1 program in college. We can argue, we can talk about the distribution of blame for that process, but it remains a reality. And I've sometimes also thought that we need to shed more light on 19 to 24-year-olds as a target area, because in that range there are people who have had all sorts of problems, sometimes of their own making, but sometimes absolutely not. And I'm thinking of people who have health issues, family circumstances, issues of bereavement. For example, in Blackpool, I know of nearly 1,000 young people who are actively carers for family members. And I've always taken the view that that 19 to 24 range is a crucial cohort from which we should be recruiting apprenticeships. And I continue to believe that. And that's why we have to promote traineeships to this cohort, but we also have to ensure that the system is underpinned by the key principle of progression. Now, what I believe is very important in terms of that is early intervention. And I applaud the Sutton Trust for having recognised this for a huge amount of time and gone on about it, and quite rightly so, identifying that earlier intervention and encounters can play a vital role in improving aspiration. We should start, in my view, looking at a much earlier age at sustained and dedicated programmes with schools and particular social and ethnic groupings. And you've had research presented here today, and I believe, for example, that should focus very strongly on some of the really difficult areas at the moment, which include some working class white children, but also people in the Afro-Caribbean community. And we need to look specifically at how that can be delivered and work with organisations that will offer testers, not a career at 9 or 10, but the widening of horizons, ambitions and perspectives. And here I think there is a parallel with the long-standing debate about social mobility in HE. If you just simply address young people, whether it's for apprenticeships or going to university, at the ages of 15 to 16, all those sorts of access courses, however much money is spent on them, everything else, will miss the essential point that if you don't grab some of their enthusiasm at an earlier stage, the lights will be switched off, or are likely to be switched off. And that's why government needs to contend with more organisations like the National Association of Head Teachers, the new NEU, Teach First, Careers and Enterprise in this particular area. And Ofsted must keep the welcome focus, as Amanda Spielman has indicated, on careers advice that helps open doors to social mobility in this context. Some of you will have heard me say before that our vision, the Labour's vision of a skills system, is moving forward continually under the motto, progression, progression, progression. And this spring, of course, we launched our consultation on our new National Education Service. And I believe that that gives us a once-in-a-generation opportunity to break down some of these silos and produce a system that reflects the needs of an interrelationship instead of existing government silos. And one of the key principles of the NES Charter is that all areas of skills and learning deserve respect, and that includes integrating academic, technical and other forms of learning. And that means parity of esteem and the parity of opportunity, which the Minister's just been talking about, and apprenticeships need to be part of that project. The question, however, is what sort of skills and education landscape we're going to see in the 2030s. And that's what we should be asking today. What sort of apprenticeships will we need? We know we're entering a period of extreme uncertainty because of a cocktail of challenges, Brexit, automation, damage already caused by neglect of both older as well as younger adults through cuts to the adult skills budget and so on. If we do not have an integrated policy, those things will keep us firmly on the back foot. That is why future-proofing our apprenticeships becomes critical. We need to look carefully at what off-the-job will mean. Training will mean in a world where we will need both more generic skills but also more bespoke skills. How do we ensure the percentage of the off-the-job training being realistic for apprentices and providers? Quality. We need, as I say, to make sure that Ofsted focuses more explicitly on content and trainer qualities. Now, the House of Lords Economic Affairs Committee was scathing about the pace of the reforms, and they said that the government had prioritised quantity over quality. I'm not sure that that's entirely true, but what I am clear about is that they are stuck in a very short time frame at the moment. It's not just the manufacturing or technical traditional professions where we need to see quality apprenticeships in the future. I've continued to say that the service sector, providing there is strong progression, can and will offer the numbers and some of the continuity we need. We are trying to plan in what we're doing in our National Education Service for the next 10 to 15 years, but it does sometimes seem as if the government is so bound up in its minority status, in its internal divisions, and in the dark matter of Brexit sucking up energy and focus, that just leaving it all to the post-18 review or struggling through to March 2019 on Brexit, or to getting that elusive 3 million target in March 2020 is the edge of their current ambitions. It's not the edge of our current ambitions. We think that we need to recognise the critical importance of training providers and employers as well as colleges. As I said to in my speech to AOP last week, their members still provide 3/4 apprenticeships going. So we need to engage with them, and we need to engage with employers. Devolution will offer new structures, mayors, combined authorities, LEPs, horizontal cooperation, not vertical. And you see already Sadiq Khan grappling with some of those issues in London. And infrastructure projects which deliver apprenticeships in a very significant way, and Crossrail, incidentally, was a very good example of that, need to be tied up with that local delivery. We can't micromanage everything from Whitehall. T-levels. A help or a distraction. Look at the lack of clarity in the mission statement, concerns about the timetable, being pushed as a brand to A-levels in competition with A-levels, not as an ecosystem. That will not help understanding where they sit in terms of progression to apprenticeships. And I don't think anyone yet knows that. Yet engagement is crucial, particularly given the government's enthusiasm for degree apprenticeships. Lastly, what I'd just like to say is I'm delighted to see that the Sutton Trust had an apprenticeship panel session here earlier this morning. The government is nowhere near using their own resources with apprentices. There are real issues for support apprentices, issues around council tax, childcare, child benefit and travel, and these are not being addressed directly. But what if I've learned anything in the last 10 to 15 years I've been working in this area, is that people who have been there and got the T-shirt are always a crucial factor when you're trying to enthuse and expand. We've got an Industry Apprenticeship Council, we've got National Society of Apprenticeships, we've got 24 new apprenticeships just appointed at the IFA. That's all great. But what are they using them for? Ministers need to meet and engage. The IFA should be using them as an ongoing resource. And we should be thinking about apprenticeships, not about today or tomorrow, but about the next 10 to 15 years.
Okay, so I think we're running slightly late, but if we can have 10 minutes of questions.
Sure.
Gordon, that's right. So any questions? Has Gordon solved all the education issues?
I very much doubt it.
Joe?
Just wondering if...
Could you just say who you are?
My name is Joe McDevitt. I'm on the development board at Sutton Trust,
Right.
and as you can hear, I'm an American, and I'm sort of new to the broader concept. I guess more of a philosophical question, not to apprenticeships, but just to what you're trying to achieve here. Someone mentioned earlier on that 51%, currently about 51% of school leavers go on to some form of higher education. Do you see is the end game, and that may be too high? There's now a lot of debt, and a lot of the degrees that students are leaving with are not proving to be as useful, as productive, and so forth. To what extent when you talk about quality and progression, are we really talking at one level about shifting from to a lower number of university graduates and just getting a certain number of those into to something that's going to lead to some kind of a degree and something where they have a job, they have no debt. You made a lot of very strong and valuable pleas for the dispossessed, those that are much not really at that, focusing on university or high-level apprenticeship, but more. But so I see this whole thing as sort of blurry and trying to figure out. You've got this higher-level apprenticeship, which everyone seems to like, and then you've got these people. You just want to get people into work and get them off of the, off of welfare or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. You want me to take?
Yes, please take that one. Yeah.
Take that one. Right. Well, you say it's all rather blurry. That's probably because the future is rather blurry, because I have been going on for years now, and certainly for the last 2 or 3 with some urgency. And anyone who's followed me around listening to what I've said will know what I'm going to say. And that is that the worlds of higher education, further education and skills, online, digital, are all very, very rapidly morphing into each other. And if we don't, as policymakers, come to terms with that, and if we don't think very strongly about structures that can accommodate that, then we will be left, leave aside Brexit and everything else, we will be left behind in this country. Not because that process won't continue, it will, but it will mean that the people who deliver it to people in this country, and I'm not wishing to be nationalistic here, will not be people in the United Kingdom. There will be people from Southeast Asia or North America, and while those are, no doubt great models to look at in some ways, it's not going to address the particular and specific needs that we have here. And that's one of the reasons why when we had the higher education, because you've talked about higher education, when we had the higher education bill, we put forward a clause to the government to set up a lifelong learning commission in order to look at how we actually bring these things together. The other thing, and you're right to talk about jobs and output and not simply about, the civics of social mobility. The other thing, of course, that we have to address is structures that will enable people to progress, but which will also record the way in which they progress and how that works. And that's one of the reasons we have talked about credit accumulation in particular and transfer. Because at the moment, the situation for credit accumulation and transfer in this country between FE and HE, or between in HE itself, is archaic and is largely dependent on the relationships of individuals rather than to a framework that does it. That's one of the things that we need to do. I think there are all sorts of models we could take from it. The Open University, for which I taught for nearly 20 years as a part-time course tutor, has done some very interesting stuff in this area. There is other stuff being done in other parts of the United Kingdom. So we need to get away from this idea of it's HE versus FE, because in the future, HE, FE, young people today, some of them will need to take and older people retraining, very, very specific, short, sharp modules. I know this from talking to Blackpool and Fowler College, who've just set up an energy college to do precisely that sort of thing. But most of them will need to acquire generic skills of a way that has not easily been accommodated in the past in HE degrees because of the nature of employment and the nature of their careers over the next 10 to 15 years. So those are the big issues which, when we all sort of cross swords about apprenticeship starts and all the rest of it, sometimes get lost. But they mustn't get lost, and they are at the heart of our NES.
Okay, other questions? One right at the back, there, on the right.
Hi, I'm Kelvin, and I'm a member of the Education Advisory Group here at Sutton Trust and an alumnus of one of their widening participation programmes. I've got a question in regards to your criticism of T-levels. A previous speaker earlier today said it would benefit to have some clarity over, for someone who's 13 or 14, certainly from my experience as a state school student, to have some clarity about, what the qualification is. And if it's a T-level, could probably help give it that kind of prestige and clarity that would help make it more legitimate and easier for a teacher to recommend. So my question is, why is it that you feel that the T-levels branding is an issue, and what would be the alternative?
Okay. Well, I feel it's. Let me make it crystal clear, in case it wasn't crystal clear, that we are not against T-levels. We support the concept of T-levels, and indeed, one of the people who was on the panel the skills panel that Lord Sainsbury put together, and bearing in mind, again, this isn't a new issue. I mean, Lee will have been hearing, as I will have been hearing, Lord Sainsbury banging on about this for the best part of a decade when we were in government as well as subsequently. But the devil is in the detail. And what concerns me, and I'll repeat what I said, what concerns me about the way the government is promoting T-levels at the moment is that they seem to be promoting them, and Damien Hines has taken this on his shoulders in the last few weeks as some of the issues and criticisms have increased. We seem to be promoting them as if the new guy in the ring against A-levels. Now, we could have a great discussion about what should have happened in the early 2000s with the Tomlinson report, but we are where we are. And the truth of the matter is, if you see T-levels simply as a new brand and not as a new ecosystem in our educational system that will enable young people to do those sorts of things that you're talking about, then I fear we are falling, into a very, very dangerous situation. So I want to see the government thinking about the principles, and particularly if we're talking. I mean, Anne was talking earlier about progression between 4 and 5, and they said they're doing research on that. Where does that lie with what they're doing at the moment with T-levels? Where do T-levels lie in context of the post-18 review? Nobody knows. And if you don't get young people interested before 16, then what will happen is that the traditional orthodoxies of opinion, which will be in the schools, often with parents and all the rest of it, will mean that T-levels will not fly. And that is not a great thing.
One last question over here.
Hi, I'm Tia. I'm from the Young Women's Trust. So I hear you saying about young people becoming more interested, but I feel like some apprenticeships aren't that interesting. So how would you then promote that? Because some young people want to get into like music and stuff, but there's not much out there for people who want to become a producer, for example. So would you want to then create more apprenticeships for young people?
The general question that you're asking to is a very important one about, how do you engage young people, and how do you engage them in areas that they are interested in the first place? And you've talked about music and the creative sector. Now, actually, about 2 weeks ago, Kevin Brennan, who's my colleague on the DCMS team, and myself sat around a table with about 30 or 40 representatives from the creative and arts industries to talk very specifically about how apprenticeships could be expanded and delivered in those areas. Very important areas. Again, not simply because they're perhaps nice things to do, but because they are really significant contributions and will be significant contributions in the future to our economy and to good careers for those young people. I think it can be quite challenging in terms of the traditional concept of an apprenticeship, especially in the creative area, where people, perhaps if they're working in broadcasting or they may be working with digital or whatever, are going to be working very much in the gig economy. They're not necessarily going to be working in big organisations. So one of the things that we are talking about, and we're talking about the groups of people and the organisations that wanted to see more of this, is how you actually do it. And here again, and I haven't had time today to talk in any depth about devolution, but here again, I think that with the new structures of mayoral structures, new combined authorities, and that some of this can be delivered very, very well in local sub-regional areas. I don't think the idea that the government sits there and micromanages the sort of things that happen in the games industry or the things that might be happening with digital is the solution to doing what you want to do and what I want to do, which is to see those young people following their enthusiasms and getting decent jobs out of it at the end of the process.
Okay, I think we're going to have to wrap up there. So thank you very much, Gordon.